The alarms started screaming the moment I touched the console, and every alien in the room turned to look at me like I had just set off a bomb. My name is Leo Carter, and 3 minutes earlier I was just a bored 17-year-old kid on a school trip, chewing on a piece of gum, wishing I was back home instead of standing inside a giant metal ring floating in the middle of deep space. Now every alien scientist in the chamber was staring at me, and none of them looked happy. Let me back up a little, because you need to understand how strange this day already was before I touched anything. 6 months earlier, humanity made first contact with a group of alien species who called themselves the Velmar Alliance. They were old, calm, and very proud of how advanced they were. They had ships bigger than our moon, cities built inside hollowed-out asteroids, and a way of talking that made every sentence sound like a lecture. They looked at us the way a teacher looks at a toddler who just learned to walk. Cute, maybe useful one day, but not to be taken seriously yet. As part of building friendly relations, they invited a small group of human students to visit one of their research stations. My school got picked because of some exchange program my science teacher signed us up for, without asking if any of us actually wanted to go. I did not want to go. I wanted to stay home and finish a video game, but here I was, floating in space in a stiff uniform that itched in places uniforms should never itch. The station we visited was not just any station. It was built around something the Velmar called the Great Ring, and it was the oldest and most respected piece of technology in their entire civilization. It was 5,000 years old. 5,000. That is longer than most of human history combined. The Great Ring was supposed to be a bridge between 2 points in space, a shortcut that could fold distance and let ships jump instantly from one side of a galaxy to another. The problem was, it had never worked. Not once. For 5,000 years, generation after generation of the smartest minds in the Velmar Alliance had studied it, prayed near it, argued about it, and built entire schools of thought around it. Some of them believed it was not meant to be understood, that trying too hard to solve it was disrespectful to the ones who built it. Others spent their whole lives running calculations that never changed. The ring just sat there, humming quietly, doing absolutely nothing useful. Our tour guide, a tall alien named Vex Orin, explained all of this in a proud, solemn voice, like he was talking about a holy shrine. The other kids on the trip nodded politely and took pictures. I stood near the back, not really listening, because 5,000 years of nothing sounded less like a mystery and more like a very long, very boring failure. No being has ever solved the great silence, Vex said, gesturing at a massive control panel covered in glowing symbols. Finest minds, across 100 generations, have dedicated their entire lives to this question. It is the greatest unsolved problem in known space. One of the older Velmar scientists standing nearby, a woman named Sella Krath, added in a serious tone, "Some things are simply beyond understanding. We do not force answers, we wait for them." That line stuck with me, mostly because it sounded like something my old teacher used to say right before giving us a worksheet nobody wanted to do. While the group moved on to the next display, I hung back near the control panel. Nobody was paying attention to me. Kids never get watched closely once adults start talking about ancient sacred technology. I looked at the panel the way I would look at any broken machine, which is to say, I looked at it like a puzzle, not a religion. There were rows of little switches, all locked in the same position, all glowing a dull blue. Above them was a single symbol that, according to the small sign nearby, had been translated to mean, the first setting. The sign explained that changing the first setting had never been attempted, because it was believed to be the foundation the entire ring was built on. Touching it was considered close to forbidden. Now here is the thing about growing up on Earth playing video games and taking apart old electronics with my cousins. When something does not work, the very first thing you try is turning it off and turning it back on. Nobody on Earth thinks that is disrespectful. It is just what you do. I looked at that glowing blue switch, and something clicked in my head. 5,000 years, and as far as I could tell from the sign, nobody had ever actually reset the thing. They studied it, they wrote about it, they meditated near it. But they never just flipped the switch off and let it restart. I should have asked permission, I know that now. But at the time I just thought, what is the worst that could happen, and pressed the switch. The whole room went dark for one heart-stopping second. Then a low humming sound rolled through the chamber, deeper than anything I had heard on the tour, like the whole station had just taken a breath. Lights flickered along the great ring itself, changing from a dull static blue to a moving, pulsing gold. That is when the alarm started. Vex Orin spun around so fast, his long robe nearly tripped him. Sellecrath dropped the small device she was holding, and it clattered onto the floor and nobody even looked at it. A dozen alien scientists rushed toward the control panel, talking fast in their own language, their voices climbing higher with every second. I froze, gum still in my mouth, hands raised like I was under arrest. "What did you touch?" Vex demanded, his voice sharp for the first time since I had met him. "The switch," I said. "The blue one. I just turned it off and back on." For a moment, nobody spoke. The whole chamber was filled with that new golden light, humming steady and strong, and readings on every screen were changing in ways they clearly had never changed before. Sellecrath walked toward the panel slowly, like she was approaching something wild that might bite her. She stared at the numbers scrolling past, then looked up at the great ring itself, where the light had steadied into a smooth, perfect glow. "It is stable," she whispered. "The energy signature is stable." Another scientist ran calculations on a floating screen, his hands shaking slightly. "The ring is drawing power correctly. The pathways are aligning. This has never happened, not once in 5,000 years. Vex Orin turned to me, and for the first time since I had met him, he did not look like a proud teacher looking down at a toddler. He looked confused, almost lost. "You reset it," he said slowly, like he was trying to understand a foreign idea. "You simply turned it off." "Yeah," I said, shrugging, because honestly it did not feel like a big deal to me. That is usually the first thing you try when something is not working. My cousin taught me that with an old radio when I was like 6. "But the first setting is sacred," he said. "No one has ever dared to interrupt it. We believed that doing so would destroy the entire structure, or worse, offend the memory of those who built it." I looked around at the golden light pulsing steadily through the ring, at the numbers finally making sense on every screen, at scientists who had studied this thing their entire lives, now staring at it like they were seeing it for the first time. "Maybe it just needed a reset," I said. "Sometimes the fix really is that simple. You guys were so busy respecting it, nobody ever just messed with it." Sellecrath sat down slowly in a nearby chair, her hands still shaking. 5,000 years, she said quietly. 5,000 years of careful thought, careful calculation, careful respect. And the answer was to be careless. "Not careless," I said, feeling a little defensive now. "Just willing to try something even if it seemed disrespectful. On Earth we mess with things all the time. We take stuff apart just to see how it works. Sometimes we break it worse, but sometimes we fix it by accident." Vex Orin stared at the glowing ring for a long moment, then looked back at me with an expression I could not quite read. It was not anger. It was something closer to wonder, mixed with a little bit of fear. "Your species is very young," he said finally. "You have not yet learned to be afraid of your own mistakes." I did not know if that was a compliment or not, so I just shrugged again. Word about what happened spread through the station fast, and within an hour, every scientist on board had crowded into that chamber to see the great ring glowing gold for the first time in 5,000 years. They took measurements, ran tests, argued in their own language about what it all meant. Through all of it, I stood off to the side with the other human students, who kept giving me looks somewhere between impressed and slightly worried that I might have broken alien history forever. Before we left the station, Sella Krath found me near the shuttle bay. She looked tired, but there was a small smile on her face that had not been there before. "You did something today that generations of our best minds could not do," she said. "Not because you are smarter than us." "I do not believe that is true." "Then why?" I asked. "Because you were not afraid to be wrong," she said. "We built our whole understanding of that ring around respect and caution. You looked at it and saw a broken machine that needed a simple fix. Perhaps that is the difference between our peoples. We ask permission from the past. You ask forgiveness from the future." I thought about that the whole ride home, staring out the shuttle window at the golden glow of the great ring shrinking behind us. I was not trying to be a hero. I was not trying to prove anything about humanity being special. I was just a bored kid who saw a switch that had never been flipped and figured, why not? Maybe that is exactly what makes us different. Not that we are smarter or braver or better. Just that we are willing to touch the thing everyone else is too scared to touch and see what happens. 5,000 years of careful, respectful silence. And all it took was one curious human teenager, 3 minutes, and a switch nobody else had the nerve to flip.